This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Josh Baer. Hello and welcome to the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this episode, we talk with Josh Baer, his new comic, Alltime Comics, Crime Destroyer, came out earlier this month. We have another one to expect, Alltime Comics Bullwhip, in another couple of weeks. And we have a great time talking with him about that project. But before we get to that conversation, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off at the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off cover price, and every single month you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Those specials could be as much as 45% off, or they could be as much as 50% off, but sometimes you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that.
That's right, and since we're talking to Josh Baer in this episode about All-Time Comics, you can actually go to DCB Service this month and get All-Time Comics Atlas #1, which is the third book in the of the 4 All-Time Comics series, and they're offering Atlas #1 for 50% off. So regular price is $3.99. You can get that for $1.99, and it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, and it's always great when we interview someone and the creator's stuff is discounted at Discount Comic Book Service, because it gives us extra reason to push not only our guests' work, but also the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. You can't go wrong with them. Check out their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your books there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
That's right.
Well, Andy, this was a fun conversation we had with Josh. And even though this is the first time we're talking with him on the show, this is not the first time that we've mentioned him, because earlier this year, you pointed out what he was doing to help support the ACLU and Planned Parenthood. And then even further back, you and I on our Publisher Spotlight on Retrofit Big Planet discussed his theft book.
Yeah, that's right. And I got a chance actually to meet Josh briefly at CXC in Columbus, which I bring up in this interview. And he actually told me there about All-Time Comics. This was back in November, so it was about a month or so before it had even been announced. And we were talking about it, and he kind of, said, I'm not supposed to be, don't spread this, but what he had described to me was really exciting, and what, we're seeing the results now, and it is everything I'd hoped it would be.
Yeah. And so your meeting with him is the genesis of this interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and give that a listen.
Yep. So we're here today with Josh Baer, one of the creative minds behind All-Time Comics, the new superhero line that's coming out, rolling out right now from Fantagrahic. We've gotten Crime Destroyer #1 so far, and Bullwhip is coming out shortly too, along with a couple other titles. So thanks for joining us, Josh.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
So one of the questions I want to start with is what were your ideas kind of behind All-Time Comics? Why do a series like this, and maybe also why with Fantagrahic?
the way the project started was my brother Sam. He's a filmmaker in Los Angeles. He, as my comics, as I started to achieve getting books out as a publisher and a cartoonist, he wanted us to do something together. So he pitched me this idea about doing a retro superhero line, and he had Crime Destroyer, Bullwhip, and Atlas already kind of laid out, and he has his own designs on what he wants to do with the character. He thought it would be characters. He thought it would be kind of a multimedia thing. I could take care of the comics things, the comic part of it, and just basically, here's a budget. Go ahead, go build this up. You can get writers. You can write them yourself. You can get colors, thinkers, the letterers, the whole deal. So I was very interested in the idea of doing comics the way they used to be done, and I thought it was a great challenge. And the idea of working with my brother goes right back. I mean, my brother practically raised me, so it goes right back to the core of how my whole life was set in motion in the 90s when he started encouraging me to go to school. I was just kind of doing nothing before that. And it was a chance for us to work together. And creatively, I feel like it being on Fantagraphics, there is like a lot of expectation about them throwing open the door in a big way and making a statement about what a Fantagraphic superhero comic is going to be. And I'm not so sure it's going to fulfill it's going to fulfill whatever those expectations might be. This isn't like the capper of a long history of Fantagraphics where they went from being a fanzine that put Gil Kane comic, superhero and sword and sorcery comics on the cover, to being a comic publisher that had such a strong design on casting themselves as a publisher that promoted art and comics, back to being like a weird retro 1970s Super Marvel comic pastiche. It was more like they already worked with a lot of talent that was putting out the book, and the work that we're doing is good, and they thought it was strong enough that when we asked them to publish it, it seemed like a no-brainer. But I don't know if it's going to satisfy people's expectations about this being this mega subversive, mega subversive achievement. It's more just like I said recently, it's kind of like when Bob Dylan and the band got together to do the Basement Tapes, and it's just people who love a certain type of music who want to just jam. So when I realized that I could get people like Al Milgrom, of course, Herb Trimpe, on this project, and then start to combine their talents with people like Benjamin Marra, later on Noah Van Sciver, Rick Parker, and just have this, and me, for what that's worth, and have this fusion of the old and the new together. I very much wanted to do it, and that's what we've done.
You mentioned earlier in there something about one of the things that excited you was making comics the way they used to be made. Like, yeah. What do you mean exactly by that?
There's just a weird place. There's a weird feeling that older comics have. The way that they are printed, the weird messed up colors, the simpler approach to the stories. Jason T. Miles and I talk a lot about discovering weird nooks and crannies of mainstream comics that get us really, that we, are really in awe of. Like, he was talking recently about the J.M. DeMatteis, is that how you pronounce his name? Defenders, from like around issue 90 to a little bit after 100. And it's the ideas he's kicking around are really, really, weird and great and strange. And they're trying to make it look like an older Marvel comic. They have Joe Sinnott inking over Don Perlin, and they really want to have it that stamp of the kind of house style on a book when that house style was kind of on its last legs. It was that was the early 80s. So it was right around the time people were getting kind of sick of the people who were doing a sort of Buscema Ramada kind of style, but not as intense. And they were ready for the next thing. And it just occupies a strange place in history. And I still get excited when I find weird old comics, and I have like a kind of a weird sick fascination with them.
Well, there's this retro feel not only in terms of the art, but also in terms of the storytelling. I mean, when I picked up Crime Destroyer, my first experience was, hey, wait a minute, I thought this was the first issue. So it's like I'm being thrown into the story world automatically, and there's a whole back world that I'm aware of,
right.
Like it used to be in the older comics. In other words, you don't have to decompress things to the point to where, you get almost no action over the entire issue. But even within the issue, I mean, how, in terms of your writing, how the characters get from one place to another, or their relationship. Like, for instance, Crime Destroyer's relationship with Atlas. When we first see Atlas in this first issue of All-Time Comics, it feels as if we should have seen Atlas before, especially regarding his relationship with Crime Destroyer. But this is the first time we see it in the comic, or in any comic, but that's the way things were. That was the kind of writing style, which is vastly different from what we see in superhero narratives today.
Well, how would they do it now?
Oh, I think that there would be an extensive backstory, even if it's a character that we have seen their backstory multiple times. There would just be a retelling, not necessarily of the origin, or it could be the origin. A kind of decompression of storytelling. So instead of having a fight scene take up just maybe one page of the comic, if that, it would take up 5 or maybe the entire issue. I mean, I've read issues where almost nothing happens. It's like My Dinner with Andre in comics.
Right, sure. I've seen a lot of books like that.
Yeah. And that's nothing that you used to see, at least in the comics when I was growing up in the 1970s and 80s and even before that.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, my brother pitched the idea to me. He had the idea that he wanted to do a project where the characters are in their 50s, and he wanted this to be a bit of a backstory. Within those confines, I could do whatever I wanted, which really appealed to me. It's like Bill Mantlo being given the ROM property. Somebody saying, here's this toy, go do whatever you want within these margins. And him ending up doing something that was really personally satisfying for him. And so if you guys ever see the movie The Wrestler, there's like, they tell Mickey Rourke's backstory with a bunch of a montage of a bunch of movie posters. So when Sam first pitched me the idea, it kind of sounded like what he wanted was a comic to be like one of these old movie posters. And it was to look like an artifact left over from when one of these heroes was at their peak. So he's told me about some concepts that he wants to do with the characters after these comics are out there. And who knows, I might try to talk him into letting us do that as a comic. But we'll see. But yeah, it was supposed to be. That's one of the roles it was supposed to fulfill. As we started discussing it, it got more intricate. He got more excited about it. He was saying that when we started spitting out ideas at each other, it was like a couple of kids. Like we met like when he was visiting New York, and we were talking about it on a walk in the East Village, and just kind of hunkered right down there on the sidewalk and just started saying, "What if we did this? What if we did this?" And then there was a lot more. And then he stepped away, let me do my thing. And there was a lot more of that with the other collaborators.
To build on what Derek said, some of the things you're saying there too remind me of when I was like 12 years old, I wrote a letter to Justice League complaining that their Justice League and Justice Society team ups used the same characters over and over again. And I wanted to see more obscure characters in them. And the response back, the letter got printed, and the editor's response back was every comic is somebody's first comic.
Yeah.
And that's like reading Crime Destroyer and Bullwhip now. what Derek's saying is the feeling I got too, that you're being launched into a series that's been existing for a long time, but it also feels like it's fulfilling that old philosophy too, that every comic is somebody's first. So you need to say that Wolverine is the best at what he does, and what he does isn't pretty in every single issue, because that's somebody's first experience with Wolverine, right?
Yeah.
So these books have that feeling as well, like they're inviting you into a world that's been around for a while, but they're going to let you find out about it too.
Cool. Good. I'm glad. Yeah. I wonder who first said that. I mean, was that like a Stan Lee quote? I've heard that before too.
Yeah, I don't know. It might have been like an editorial policy at some of these places during those times.
Yeah.
Maybe at Marvel and DC.
I wonder if I feel like I've heard when I read Back Issue and other, industry nostalgia magazines, like people like Roy Thomas will say that was kind of like that was a mantra around the offices.
Mm-hmm.
One of the many sayings.
I want to go back to something you said a little while ago, Josh, and that was you referenced bringing this idea to Fantagraphics and how Fantagraphics could be a place where there could be something subversive going on. And then you said, but you've been telling people maybe it's a little more like Bob Dylan and the band getting together for what we call the basement tapes. I don't know. I'm thinking of subversive at Bob Dylan. It's more like Bob Dylan doing what he's been doing very recently with the American Songbook, right? I mean, people are going like, what the hell is this all about? For Bob Dylan, that's subversive. So this subversiveness was this one of the ideas when you went to Fantagraphics and talked with Gary Groth? I mean, did this idea of, we'll do this and it will be something that will surprise a lot of people and we can, rile a lot of fans up by doing this? Was the subversive element baked into this idea? Not from your standpoint, but in your relationship with Fantagraphics?
It was, I've just been taking care of the creative side of it. What happened was Jason T. Miles, who is a cartoonist and trying to remember what he has a position. He's like some kind of position at Fantagraphics. I can't remember the term, but he's one of their trusted staff members. So he was on hiatus, and I needed somebody's help organizing because I was juggling a lot of plates. And I asked him if he would come in and help me, and he was really excited about the project. So he brought it to them, and what those conversations were about, I don't know. And we had talked about bringing it to, a couple of obvious publishers, but Fantagraphics was his home. And of course, that Fantagraphics publishes my favorite books of all time. And Benjamin Marra was already there. So I'm not sure how the conversations went, but I think it was just based on how good is the work? Is this interesting enough? Is it from their vantage point? Is it interesting to have the young and the new like working together and having, I saw this as a chance where to basically embrace this trend that's going on where so many younger creators are like kind of giving salutes or salutes to the work that that was in the mainstream when that inspired them when they were little, without any kind of complications around it. The first person I ever saw that was part of the newer brigade of cartoonists who just seemed to have no problem embracing older simple superhero comics was Jeffrey Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, 10 years younger than all the people who were drawing a deep line in the sand in indie comics 10 years, in the 90s. So Daniel Clowes and Charles Burns and a lot of the other Peter Baggy were all saying, we're against those comics. But I've talked to one or two of those creators, and they say, no, we didn't necessarily literally mean fuck all those comics. We were doing that because nobody else was speaking up for us. So a good policy was to be, hey, we're replacing them, and we represent a revolution in how to do comics. But younger creators, Benjamin Marra, Frank Santoro is another person who has publicly been out there, both embracing indie comics and everything that they mean. And, he'll be at festivals and he'll be selling long boxes full of weird old Marvel comics. So I like to say, we're all in the same gang, and the opportunities are going away to have that generation, the Milgrom, Trimpe, Bronze Age generation, and to get down and call those guys up and say, let's do something together. Let's get you with somebody really interesting who's doing newer comics. Unfortunately, I mean, there's people who I would have loved to have gotten Don Perlin involved with this. We only have so many names we can work with. I would have loved to have gotten a lot of other people who aren't around anymore. There's also other people who are around that we'd like to get in the future, but it's a dream come true.
It's funny you mentioned the Frank Santoro thing, because you and I had talked briefly at CXC in Columbus, and I picked up, like a bunch of grab bags of, Frank Santoro curated Marvel comics from the 70s. And it was like such an exciting thing reminded me when I was a kid and you got those, 3 comics in a bag for $1 or whatever at the 5 and dime. Yeah. So you saw what was on top and what was on the bottom, and you open it up and it was I had a couple issues of the Man from Atlantis comic in there and stuff like that. And that is such that's such a great thing. And it looks like
written from Mantlo, so those are probably pretty good, actually.
Yeah. The bag was almost all Mantlo. So you're working, but the guys you're working with here too are some of the people that when you talk about that stuff, I think of, like, Jim Rugg is doing covers, right?
Yeah.
And and he's one of those guys that's completely into this era of comics in this really fun and unironic way.
Oh yeah, and he can do it. He doesn't have to. He really had people like him, and especially Marra he's a throwback, and Marra is even more of a throwback. Yeah. And there's a phenomenon of Crumb was reworking stuff that was around. Well, that was right before he grew up. That was around, and he was obsessed with the 1920s and 30s comics, and that makes sense. He was those were still on his periphery when he was growing up. And then Marra is very, he's the same way. I don't know. He's 35. It's the same. He has the same relationship with Bronze Age comics. He also loves, like, he has a lot of positive things. I won't say he loves them, but he has a lot of positive things to say about the Image guys, and more than I do. But I love that he's scavenging whatever he can, whatever he needs to. And recently he on a nerdy technical level, I did a panel with him, and he was talking about how he's doing a certain shading technique that Jim Lee does. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, I hate Jim Lee. But when Marra does it, it looks good. I shouldn't say that. You can edit that out later.
Let's talk about the first issue that just recently came out, All-Time Comics Crime Destroyer. And I have to ask you, where did you get the idea for his costume?
That's Marra.
Oh.
Yeah, I should at some point publish the other potential designs that he had. He had that was, it's funny, we gave them to my brother, and I can't remember if he picked it or if we submitted it to see if he'd accept it. But we were really glad. And Marra was like, that's my favorite design. They didn't all have fists on the shoulders. he also, I was going back and looking at the designs for Bullwhip, and I pretty much designed her costume. I was like, oh, let's put stars on the sleeves and a zipper down the middle. And he had a design at one point that was like a cat suit with like a hairband that somehow was formed in the letter as a letter B, W, letters BW, but also held her bouffant hair in place. I mean, you never see anything like it. It was like it's not practical, and that's the direction he wanted to go in.
Well, I know when I first picked up Crime Destroyer, it took me a beat or two to get my eyes wrapped around the costume of Crime Destroyer, because I saw those fists coming out of his shoulders, and I thought, is someone standing beside him? Is this something I'm not seeing clearly? Is the art, because I was looking at a PDF, is it there's something wrong with this? Then I realized, no, he's got fists on top of his shoulders.
Yeah. Trimpe didn't want to draw them. He was like, he kept on asking if we could take them off. And so I considered anything. I forwarded the letter to Ben, and there's 2 issues coming out of Crime Destroyer, one with Ben and one with Herb. So I considered having, I think we ended up telling Herb, if it just doesn't work, we can have somebody redraw them. And I also considered taking them out. And Ben wrote Herb this impassioned email about retaining the integrity of what this design is, and he's like, yeah, the fists are ridiculous, but we're going all out with this. And it was integral, and it was, it was important to the success of the character that conceptually that we keep the fists. It was really funny. He's a funny guy.
I want to get back to the comic, but I didn't realize how cool that costume was until I saw it in the trailer.
Oh yeah.
The live action version of that costume is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Sam went all out with the trailer. I think it's really. I didn't think originally we were just going to get a guy in a costume, have a car pull up, and just do a 30-second trailer where I think Sam said, the car pulls up, the guy steps out, points his gun at the camera, gun goes off, and it says, Alltime Comics coming soon. And he just kept on, but the net just kept on getting wider and wider. So, he really went out on a limb, pushing as far as he could to make the trailer as incredible as it could be. It's pretty cool.
Now with getting back to the comic, you mentioned really earlier, that comment I touched on before about how comics used to be made. And, we first got copies of these 2 books on PDF, but when I got the physical copy of Crime Destroyer, I was really blown away by, just things like the paper choice.
Yeah.
And the printing and the ads and stuff that you're doing with this. So could you talk about kind of the idea of making it even look like it's a physical object that came from that period?
Yeah, that it continues to be about it being a group effort. I think Sam asked us to do the ads, and we had a lot of different approaches to the ads. I wasn't as clear on how to do that as I was when I jumped into writing the stories. So we tried a lot of different approaches, and the final stage of it was really look at cool ads, write something that is fun, that has the elements of the funnest, coolest ads, do some research. And I ended up the early ads were they didn't involve the heroes, and they didn't make as much sense. So we have a bunch of ads that were done that we'll probably see print eventually, but they're a lot more picking up obscure things from different comics, ads for becoming a private detective, or ads or get movie memorabilia. We tried to do, at first it was weird random ads, and the vibe of them was more it's been done. Everybody knows what flash art from the 1950s comics looks like, with ads for hypnosis and stuff like that. It's very, very, it's kind of done in the 80s where everybody was like, look how weird the 50s were. So we started so we did it. And we had, I contacted a lot of friends, a lot of artist friends, like the same people who would have been in Suspect Device, and pitched these ideas to them and paid them. And they turned out like no fault of the artist, but they just weren't that inspired. But Sam, so I brought it back to Sam, and Jason and I were both like, it kind of works and it kind of doesn't. And Sam really wanted the ads. So he, I guess it's kind of like they used to call it the chicken, like Mad Magazine, Kurtzman. He used to talk about how important it was to have the tiny cartoons around the edges of Mad Magazine. He's like, that's I forget the phrase he used.
The chicken fat.
The chicken fat. That's
right.
it. So Sam wanted the chicken fat. So we had a more detailed, clearer conversation about it. And and he started, saying, the really cool ads. So I started collecting the ads that I loved. He's like the Halloween ads and the nuclear, get your own nuclear sub ad and this one and that one. So a video game, and then I got the idea for doing I found like an ad for like the first Star Trek convention. And, back then it was like 30 people in a room with folding tables. So I thought it would be really cool to do like a really budget All-Time Comics festival convention. And so I made up an ad for that. I did the art, which I copied, kind of was sort of inspired by like a really cheap ad I found that was for a festival from the 70s where a fan did their own picture of the Hulk and Spider-Man. And I kind of recomposed them as our characters. And then I got Ken Landgraf to ink it. Ken Landgraf, if you know his work, has do you guys know his stuff?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So he is still around, still actively doing commissions. And I think probably comics too. New York City Outlaws was his solo book. And we keep on sending him work for like covers and pinups. And he can transform anything that's rough, anything that's kind of like single thin line, he can transform it to like a big, gritty kind of Rick Buckler era, Bronze Age looking, pulpy, amazing comic, just seeped with that energy. So he inked that page for the festival, and I made up a bunch of text for it. And then we have, of course, the first one, which we wanted to do, was the Halloween ad, because I always loved those in the 70s, sorry. The John Romita image of the kids running towards the camera. So we had Ben Marra do that. And we have a few more that we do have a bunch of pages that we're going to continue to bring out, where we have pages that we laid out to look like those really dense pages full of the ones of all the little ads. We have like about 6 or 7 pages of those. Filled them up with, they look like the old dense Bronze Age ads for like random people who could only afford like a square inch of space. They'd all be on one page. So we got as many of those as we could, and we put the names of a bunch of indie publishers, Cartoon Museum in Columbus, our friends who like are doing commissions, and even people outside comics. So that's kind of fun. I'm looking at the PDFs now, and I'm like, oh, I forgot we did that. We actually get to promote all of our friends who are out there doing indie comics inside of this comic, which looks like a mainstream comic, and is cool. Another way of bringing those worlds together.
When I saw the Halloween costume ad, at first I thought it was fake, and then I looked more carefully at it. I'm like, wait a minute, is this is this real? And then I thought, well, maybe they don't have XL, but I could see about this. And then realize, oh wait, it's I don't think there's a place called Ditko-esque New York with a 6-digit zip code. but it's really it's really close. It's not like the really there's some ads that are fake ads that are so, overt, especially overt in a coupon, that this is not something that's real. I think you did a good job of
Thanks.
planting the seed of doubt in there.
Awesome. Keenan Keller, he laid out all he made the coupon really look like a coupon.
Yeah. So somebody in Ditko-esque New York almost got a check for $10.
Boy, I feel at a loss because my issue of Crime Destroyer has not arrived yet.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah.
You ordered it from where?
Our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service. It's just that the kind of shipment schedule that I'm on, I will get it at the end of this month.
Cool.
Yes. Although, for our listeners, do not let that be a turnoff. Definitely shop at Discount Comic Book Service.
Yeah, and also keep in mind around the time this is airing, we'll have Bullwhip coming out April 15th, I think, is the schedule, if that's a Wednesday.
Good.
And I should be doing a signing at JHU Comics in New York City. And we'll have the thing about the books to keep in mind is that every book is a self-contained story. I sound like Stan Lee. The thing to keep in mind is that makes these really saleable. But they're self-contained stories. So come in anywhere if people are interested in buying the comics and they missed the first issue. Every story is an independent comic that has a beginning and an ending within the comic. So, but people should know that the comics are not they're not dependent on each other. You can come in at any point. You can get the first issue of Bullwhip, and then the next month you can get Atlas, or you can get in June you can get Justice or Blind Justice, and then you can get all of these comics, or you can get just one of them to try them out. But you won't be lost if you just pick up a random issue. They're all meant to be self-contained stories.
So you've got the four issues you described there.
Six.
Okay. So what are other than Crime Destroyer, Bullwhip, Blind Justice, and Atlas? What else is there?
It's just that there's two issues of Blind Justice and there's 2 issues of Crime Destroyer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be more beyond that, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been working with Josh Simmons on we call it season 2, so, which I guess makes it sound like TV, but it really sticks for me as a concept. So we have season 2 that we're developing now, and we got Trevor Von Eden to doing art, basically done with the whole issue, and the next one is going to be cohesive, a story that actually ties all the characters into one long narrative. So I plotted it over the phone with Josh Simmons, and we came up with one idea after another, and came up with a through line. And then I handed it over to him and just let him write it, because he's a great writer. He's an amazing. I mean, I would be if I wasn't a writer, artist, publisher dude, I would be the people I'm working with would be my biggest comics heroes. Mm-hmm. So Josh Simmons is top of the list, and he was willing to do it. He wrote the whole fucking thing, and I'm based on our co-plots. Trevor is knocking it out of the park. We were interested in getting another inker on top of him just as an experiment to keep that energy going, but he really wanted to ink himself, and what he's delivering is really cool. And then we're going to continue to involve indie creators in it. Since Trevor's doing the lion 80% of the work, we wanted to still sneak in newbie people who are more new independent creators. I don't want to mention them because they actually haven't started to do the work yet, but we're going to continue to have, aside from Josh and me, the 2 Joshes, we're going to continue to have other artists doing work as well who are from the other end of the in the other end of the spectrum, people who are from the really acclaimed independent comics who also have a lot of chops in terms of being able to make a comic look. I don't know. I wouldn't. What's the word for comic realism? I mean, I guess it's a term that has different meanings for different people, but they can approximate the kind of conventional look of a Bronze Age comic.
Huh. I love Trevor Von Eden's stuff, and I'm so glad that he's inking his own stuff, because that's one of the things I used to love when a comic of his came out that he inked himself, because because his style is so distinct. There were only like a couple inkers I felt like could do him justice. I think like Brett Breeding did a good job on him, but yeah, I mean, and he's one of those guys that should be talked about with the major artists who came out of comics in the 80s, because he was doing his like Green Arrow miniseries and Thriller were things that are like, there's so much innovation in those books.
Oh yeah. He's like unstoppable. It's he's still doing it with the pages he's producing. It's freaky how that vision just comes right out of him.
I think I think one of the big draws for this, and getting back to the significance of this coming out as a serial through Fantagraphics, is that you're bringing a superhero title to them. You're bringing together older creators and younger indie creators in a much more inclusive way. But there's also that, I guess, serialization aspect, and I'm remembering, I think correctly, that when Fantagraphics was first announcing All-Time Comics, they did so by emphasizing not only the superhero aspect, which people don't expect from Fantagraphics, but also the serial aspect. And they've done serials before in the past, of course, but over the past good number of years now, it's a rarity that they've done anything like this. And so, I mean, what part does the serialization, do you feel as the writer, bring to this project in a way that, let's say, other Fantagraphic properties wouldn't have?
I can't speak to like what the other properties don't have, but I think when people write me and tell me this is giving me that joy I used to have about looking forward to a comic every month, that makes me really happy. I thought we would do every 2 months and drag it out over a year, but it was decided that we do them every month. So the books have been done for a while, but we're still polishing and putting finishing touches on them. So there is a bit of a sense of, having to perform on within like strict limitations. So all of that is something that I love. And there was discussion also, because sales are down with floppy comics. There was discussion about not doing them as floppies and doing them as trade paperbacks. But we wanted, this is the format that we wanted. We wanted that, there's like for it sounds nerdy, but there's like a magic to the memories that people have of looking at old comics and them being on a spin rack, and people's memories of going to a public place that sells something you have a very personal connection to. And we can't provide all of that, but we can have an echo of it. Mm-hmm. These aren't going to be in 7-Eleven in Nebraska or something like that, unfortunately. But they, work gets out there. And I really like the idea that we're going to do a trade collection later as well. I'm trying to see if I can have it only done as a paperback book and not a hardback. I just don't really I don't think comics are meant to be hardbacks. I don't I know that they sit on the bookshelf. I know the paperbacks fall apart over time, and that's a drag, but they feel more like comics to me.
Huh. I feel like the Crime Destroyer, like it, you talk about that feeling like comics too. Like that paper even smells like a comic. And so I imagine if I leave this out for 10, 20 years, it'll smell like an old comic too. And so it's going to age like the rest of my collection. But you mentioned that Bullwhip's coming out April 15th. And so we were glad to get review PDFs of that. And I love that issue. I think but the tone is kind of surprisingly different from Crime Destroyer. And it's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
So when it opens with Bullwhip shouting, "Drop your weapons, misogynist," and step back. I didn't realize that the villain is the misogynist. That's his name. I thought she was just calling this dude a misogynist, but but that is Bullwhip's such a wild ride. So were there choices you were making between the two different books and maybe the others that we haven't seen yet in terms of the tone?
It's about just it being a collective enterprise. That is that issue Ben and I plotted, and he I mean, all the pacing, all the beats are all him, and he basically wrote it and gave it to me, and then I rephrased all the dialogue because he had that he was doing it in this sort of intentionally stilted way that he wrote One Man War on Terror. So he, it was, I think the first line in his version was, "Back off, misogynist, put down that female rock star." So it sounded like an android wrote it, which it was a great vibe of One Man War on Terror. There was like a wonderful push-pull between how intensely disturbing the content was and the way it was being presented, as if I think I wrote a review of it where I said it was very much like being inside of it was a very specific mindset. So we wanted a different feeling for this one. So he let me Stan Lee his dialogue that has no ego. And so I'm down as writer, and I did plot it because Ben came up with the misogynist. I came up with Candy, Chrysalium, the female rock star. He came up with the princesses. I came up with Time Vampire. It was very much plotted by both of us, and I came up with the ending. And my brother came up with Raingod. That was his vision. He came to that with me on day one. So the tone of it, if it's different, that's to Ben's credit. So the issues that I feel very much like the issues that he didn't have anything to do with, which were the two Blind Justice issues, they feel like the Ditko books and everything else are like the Kirby books. Ditko did Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, and everything else at Marvel was all Kirby. And that's how this is. Like 3/4 of the books are they carry Ben's imprint, whether he's inking or penciling and plotting. And then there's these two weird books that are that I wrote on my own and did with other collaborators. And we'll see how once those are out. I'd be interested in hearing people's feedback.
Yeah. I want to second Andy's comment about just the difference in tone between the first one, Crime Destroyer, and the one that's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks, Bullwhip. And for me, the difference between the two in the tone comes down, I think, primarily with the villains. And they are not only the misogynist, but also Time Vampire. I mean, the whole idea of a Time Vampire is just hilarious anyhow. Connected to the vampire future.
Yeah.
And the thing I enjoyed about that issue and these villains is, to a point, they're almost intentionally bad. I mean, in a very ironic way, but not completely, right? So it's like you're not going for the camp, but you're stepping a toe in that direction and then leaving it there, without going any further. So there's both the emphasis on, don't take this seriously, while at the same time they're written in such a way that, at least I assume as a reader, I should take them seriously.
Yeah, I think that I like to write with like real emotion and try to make these like the stories like puzzles that are credibly entertaining. And I don't want to write like a joke comic from beginning to end. It doesn't like really appeal to me. So yeah, it ends up, I think it can be both sincere and satirical and a farce. There's this episode of the Justice League cartoon where it's a big tribute to Gardner Fox's, 1950s and 60s stories. And the comic, if they go to this planet where they have a pastiche of the old Justice League characters from the 60s, or maybe it's supposed to be the Justice Society. But it's an interesting story. It's got camp elements. It's got heartbreaking elements to it, and it's got elements that are satirical of that are critical of comics and cultural mores, and I think it can be all those things.
Well, without giving anything away, you talked about critical elements. Can we expect in future issues, if not the first season, then maybe, as you call it, the second season of All-Time Comics, some kind of commentary, even masked on not necessarily comics culture, but larger American culture? I mean, things that we're going through right now, politically.
I feel like that is it's always all in the air before when we were writing these issues. And a lot of the villains do feel very much like they it's just cathartic to have all these people getting punched out, because all the villains do remind me of the public people who are running our fucking government right now, and the kind of mob mentality among the public, and how much ugliness is coming out right now. So I think there is already some of that elements. I mean, there's always conflict in American culture. So, but when I read them, I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote this 3 years ago, and it does feel very much like about things that are happening now.
With
Josh being involved, the other Josh Simmons, he's got a really interesting aesthetic, and I do think that the comics in the second season might be considered to be more subversive than the first season. The first season is very much like we're just trying to figure out who these characters are and trying to figure out if we can write in this. What's that phrase? We can write in this. I'll just say in this style. There's a word I can't think of, and to kind of figure out what we're doing as we go along.
When you talk about the villains that you're writing, if I understand right, so Misogynist's powers are that he has this device that he yells his hateful speech into this machine that turns it into his power blasts.
Yeah, destructive sonic blasts, and then he comes back in season 2. And we continue to play with how you might be able to rejigger his technology and what's the word when you channel it into different directions. So he comes back. I don't want to give away too much, but we basically took a lot of core elements that we placed in season 1 that we didn't necessarily do with a larger plan in mind. But then when Josh and I started to plot it, we started to say, we could play with this. We could have a callback to something we did early. So even though we've been improvising all these stories, which hopefully gives it a kind of creatively fresh feeling, it's been ended up turning into something that's sustainable. And I think that's a good way to make art.
Mm-hmm.
You see it all the time on. I've been watching that show Love on Netflix, which is amazing. And I went back and watched season 1, and they have like this character can't remember. He was from Mad Men. And he plays like Jillian, the main girl's ex-boyfriend. And when you see him in the first season, it's clear they had no idea who he was. And he probably is just going to do this one scene walk on. And they even kind of presented some information that conflicted with the way they ended up writing him later, but you could kind of, rejigger it either way. And you see that a lot when you watch the first seasons of TV shows. You can see that they often feel really raw. And with this series, it makes a lot of sense. The personalities involved, who are from the indie scene and have that DIY vibe, it kind of makes sense that there would be a raw, messy, chaotic feeling to some of the stories. And so we embrace that. And there's just kind of, hopefully it has sort of like a punk feeling. But I think there's something that is pretty much a constant when you're doing narrative stuff, that people try to make these stories live the best way that they know how. And sometimes they don't really know where they're going.
Now, in the first issue that just recently came out with Crime Destroyer, Atlas makes an appearance. Are we going to see more of this crossing in the future issues of All-Time Comics between other heroes in the other comics visiting other titles?
Yeah, the villains. I think Revenger is in four of the issues or something. I think Raingod is in many of the issues. And by the way, Revenger was a name that Sam pitched to me, and I think Chuck Foreman came out with his Revenger comic right after that. And so I actually wrote Chuck and said, "What do you think?" And I go, "Do you feel like should we think about changing the name?" And he said, no, don't worry about it. If you look online, there's 5 different Revengers in comics. So those villains make appearances in many of the comics, and the heroes do as well. We have in the final issue, we have 2 of the heroes kind of in a cutaway scene in one of Justice's stories. One of the weirder questions I got recently was, are we going to see other Fantagraphic properties inside comics? I'm like, you think like Death Ray is going to show up? You think that, you think that, Angel from Love and Rockets is going to show up? I wouldn't really.
Buddy Bradley has a walk-on role.
Yeah, exactly. So we, sorry, what was the question? I'm forgetting. Oh,
no, you actually did answer the question.
Yeah.
But kind of a follow-up to that is, with this second season that you've referenced, are we going to see the introduction of entirely new heroes?
Josh and I are excited about some ideas, and I don't think, there's at least one, and we kicked around this idea of a couple of different heroes, and I've gone on to, working on other projects since we were neck deep in development. So I don't remember everything, but there was we have some ideas, some different personalities that we wanted to bring into it. The idea of like a fuck up hero, the idea of like somebody who looks up to the other heroes. The idea of somebody who's like a kind of like then some stories they'll have a character who's like a force of chaos, and he'll be
something like a Schlemazel man or something.
Yeah. Like a character who's like a smart ass, who's kind of like neither a hero or a villain, and he kind of can really set a lot of pieces into motion. I forget, like it's a Joseph Campbellish concept. I think they call them. Can't think of the name of it. I can't remember which archetype it is, but we had toyed with that, and we ended up putting a lot of those attributes into a new villain that we're introducing. So for now, no new titles, but it's basically going to continue to focus on the 4 heroes that we have. And believe me, it's already a lot to handle. And juggling that many characters, doing a group story, Josh found it kind of exhilarating, and so did I. But it had a lot of there's a lot to balance. And when you talk to mainstream creators, I feel like especially the artists, they talk about the same thing. Drawing a group book can be really tricky. I know that Gene Colan was like, he was on the Avengers, and Jim Shooter was giving him all kinds of shit. If you read the Untold Marvel Comics story, he was almost using like a great artist. So the story they tell there is that it was an example of Jim Shooter basically using a great Marvel artist as a punching bag, just always telling him his work was wrong and it was off. But Gene Colan himself was like, I don't belong on the fucking Avengers. I have to do all these, I have to cram 6 characters into these tiny panels. And it was like a weird, so there's a lot of challenges implicit in doing a group book.
Yeah, that's funny. I had a subscription to the Avengers when Gene Colan came on when I was a kid. And I did realize that I like Gene Colan from Dracula and from Daredevil, but this didn't work.
Who was the other guy at that time? Tom Hall, was he on it around that time too?
Bob Hall.
I love his work on the event. I didn't like it when I was a kid, but now I feel it has that kind of Jack Chick quality to it. kind of universally like just seems that he has a really everyman way of drawing, kind of like no interest in having like a real strong, unique identity. And that's kind of like it's a narrative in and of, into itself. Like the artists who just wanted to draw like their best approximation of guys who are copying other guys. That's always really fascinating to me. And looking back, the funny thing is people who were just trying to rip off Rick Buckler, who was trying to rip off Buscema, they have this weird energy that you can't capture now. Like there were so many Kirby imitators at that time they were almost like a dime a dozen, like Ron Wilson, who I love. But I sound like I'm insulting him, but I'm not. But whatever they were trying to do, even though at the time it was considered to be very unoriginal and very, just like cheap, like a cheap knockoff. It's like a great counterfeiter who starts to be respected in his own, for his in his own, as being an artist in his own right. And you don't have aside from Scioli, I can't think of anybody who there's one other guy who's maybe kind of approximating Kirby, but it's much rarer. There was a guy who was doing Cable for a while. I can't remember who it was though.
Ladron?
Yeah, it looked a lot like Kirby. Do you know who I mean?
Yeah. Was it Ladron? Ladronn?
Sorry, I thought you said, is that the guy? Probably. I thought you said, was it drawn?
When you mention those guys too, one of the names that comes to mind for me is a guy that you work with on these books, which is Al Milgrom, and his era of the Avengers when he was penciling that and Joe Sinnott was inking it is one of my top 5 favorite runs of superhero comics. And so I was really cool to see his name in your books too, and that's doing awesome. Reviews in the back, right?
Yeah, isn't that cool? Yeah, we I think Zach Soto suggested that, and that we actually have him review books, because I was telling him about Al can't help but being an editor, so he would talk about other creators, and I would send people's like work to him because I considered having him pencil and other younger inkers ink him. And I'd send him somebody who I thought looked like he had an approximation of a 1970s Marvel style. And I'd send it to him, and he would be like, it's not really that good. It's okay, but it's kind of half baked for this reason and that reason. And I got really interested in his perspective. He had so much to say. So I was like, I'm going to send you a bunch of comics and see what you have to say about them. And it's another way that we're highlighting the kind of two ends of the spectrum coming together. I really wanted to hear what he had to say about Prison Pit. which is which is one of the most successful comics of this decade to me. And I wanted to hear what he had to say. And he was just kind of like, it's good, kind of ick, on a certain level. It's kind of the perfect review.
Yeah, I love the line. I suppose if this was an old Lee Kirby monster book, it would have been titled, "I battled Come the Creature from Ballsack."
Oh, I missed that. Yeah. It's funny. I just read this George Orwell biography, and Orwell used to review, he used to be a book reviewer and a film reviewer. So that's really amazing because I found him reviewing a movie that I actually love called High Sierra with Humphrey Bogart. Yeah. It's just so weird because as they say in the book, George Orwell, his life started at the dawn of the industrial era and it ended at the dawn of the atomic era. Mm-hmm. And there's one part where he reviews, it kind of reminds me of Milgrom and Johnny Ryan. He reviews Salvador Dali's biography. And apparently Dali wrote a biography where it's just filled with scatological imagery. So Orwell's review is like, and then there's a giant protoplasmic woman appears on the horizon and leaves excrement like littering the desert as she walks down a highway, and there's a atomic missile that explodes inside of a skull that looks like an iron cross, and there's a stream of urine that like circles the world like the rings of Saturn, and then the last two lines of the dialogue of the review are, "It stinks."
So is Al Milgrom? You mentioned he's going to do maybe other reviews. Is he going to ink some more stuff with Alltime Comics?
Season 2. What do we have? Yeah, we do have not as much. He did he did one 50-page comic for us in season 1 over Noah Van Sciver, because that's a giant size issue to basically tie up the whole series. He inked 30 pages or whatever, 27 pages on top of Ben. And then he inked, what else did he do? He did, I'm drawing a blank. I feel like he did another series, but he did a lot. That's 80 pages right there.
Yeah.
In the following season, we have talked about having him ink on top of some of the younger artists, and it's still in the works. He might just do some pinups or something like that, but he continues to be. When I talk to him, his enthusiasm for the project hasn't seemed to be dampened any. He loves to work, and he doesn't seem like he is. He needs the money. He doesn't seem like the work is easy for him. It is still, it's painstaking, detailed work that he's doing. But for, reasons known to him, he is interested. I'm not going to say he loves doing the work, but, I hope it's fun for him, but he wants to. So that's a pretty cool phenomenon. Mm. I could see this. I know that the market has changed. So before he worked with us, he was doing a lot of Archie comics, and he would so doing the type of stuff that he really built his identity on is maybe those opportunities are few and far between.
It seems like there's a lot of great creators from that era who are working on Archie comics, I see John Workman doing a lot of lettering on Archie comics, and I think about John Workman's lettering on like Walt Simonson's Thor.
Oh yeah,
being like the greatest lettering I've ever seen, and that seems like, wow, why isn't he? Why aren't we seeing him in more superhero books?
Yeah, Rick Parker too. It's the same. Who's the guy who used to draw, I'm drawing a total blank. He worked on Iron Man of Denny O'Neil. He worked on Deadshot miniseries. That was some of my favorite work by him. He did the artist. He did
Luke McDonnell.
Yeah, isn't he just you'll see his name pop up. Like I saw a Captain America story that he did like 5 years ago when I was working at a comic store in Midtown, Cosmic Comics, which isn't there anymore. And he had done a Captain America story where they had colored him in a way that he just looked like a clone of the other guys who were working on the book. It was really gross. They really, and I don't know if his style has changed that much or if they just buried him underneath all of this unnecessary, the weight of all this unnecessary color effects, these unnecessary color effects. Because the coloring at that time, everything was very, very modeled. And that was a shame. And other people have told me that they see his names on credits just coloring. It's like, it's like was it Paul Reinman who went from being like an inker on Kirby, and then you saw him as a colorist, like in the 80s when nobody at the time, like his style wasn't in vogue. And he just basically worked his way down the chain of jobs in the industry and still hung on there for years and years. I think it was either George. I mix up George Rousseau, George Bell, and Paul Reinman, who I think two of those names are the same person.
Yeah, that funny you mentioned that because I've got an old Dell comic that Joe Sinnott penciled.
Yeah,
and I've never, and it's an adaptation of the movie The Naked Prey. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie.
What's that about?
It's stars Cornell Wilde, and he's in Africa, and he's like basically stripped of all his clothes. All he has left is a loincloth, and this tribe gives him like a head start, and they chase after him.
No, I think I've seen it.
Yeah. So anyway, but I when I saw that, I thought, I can tell this is Joe Sinnott inking it, but then I looked at credits, and it's like, man, I'd never seen him pencil before. He's always been an inker to me.
Yeah. Yeah, some of those inkers would, I don't know if complain is the right word, but they would comment that their penciling abilities would atrophy over the years of just being inkers. I think, not Chick Stone, but there's a Kirby inker from the early days of Fantastic Four who wrote like a biography. Do you guys ever see this? He did like a comic biography, and he basically complained that being relegated to being an inker for so long, he didn't have a chance to shine anymore as a penciler. And then when he did have a chance, he was like, I could have been a contender. I'm too old for this now. But something weird happens to your penciling skills. And that's the weird thing about comics. In some ways, it's better to adopt a style where it's so rough that even if you get lazy with it, it still can retain a lot of vitality. Because there's something weird that happens when people get out of the game and then they come back to it. And sometimes their work compared with how tight it was has clearly gotten more rubbery and like less disciplined. Like they're just not in that zone anymore.
Well, Josh, I want to ask you about something that actually we had mentioned briefly before we turned the recorder on, and that is something that you've done recently with your art and helping out charitable causes like ACLU, Planned Parenthood. And this is something that we've mentioned on the show before, but I think we did so more in passing. But you're the first creator that we've talked to since all of this started going on back in January.
Right.
Yeah. Tell us about your experiences in doing this.
Well, I was online, and I work like 7 days a week. I teach so much that some days because I teach on the side, I have my day job, and it really gets, I keep a lot of plates spinning. So people were gathering for the protest, and I felt really bad about it, but I didn't have it in me to go to the protest. I was like, I'm going to be hustling over there with all of my shit in a bag. And then walking my bike up and walking around for this protest, and I didn't feel like it was a great use of my energy. But I think I saw Sarah Glidden was the first person I saw who basically kicked this into motion, and her and Leanna Fink got 500. This was an offer that people did to do if you give me to encourage people to contribute money to the ACLU or Planned Parenthood, saying that if you send me your receipt, I'll send you artwork. So Sarah Glidden did a ton. Leanna Fink did 500 and she had to cap it. Other people did like 100. I got like 58 orders, and I was so I raised almost $3,000 because it was like a minimum of $50 to give somebody art. So, or I had some kind of relationship. Maybe those people were going to do it anyways, and this made them feel good. So I told people, I put no limits on it. I said, I will draw whatever you request. And by the way, I just shipped out. I still have a list that I'm working my way down. So if you haven't gotten yours yet, it's sent out like, I think I still have like a dozen to send, though a couple of them, I can't find the names in my email list because I'm a huge asshole. So if you are waiting on a piece and you haven't heard from me, I haven't said to you, hey, I'm sending your piece, please reach out to me. There was one person who wanted me to do Peter Falk, and I can't remember who they were.
Peter Falk.
Yeah, I did a portrait of Peter Falk. I did another one was a husband and wife who wanted a portrait of them. Lovely people. I did a nice portrait. I can't find the email. Another person wanted me to do just a portrait, a photo that she took of her, of the protest, the women's protest in front of the Washington Monument. None of those people I've been managed to keep track of their names. I don't know if I erased them or if Gmail, it needs to be sued, but it's probably Gmail's fault because why blame myself? But if you're out there, please reach out. Everybody else I think should either has work on the way or has work that I've started. And I got to say it was really good for me, my art practice, to do this. I discovered, it's a new challenge. I always kind of worked faster with color. I don't do color comics when I'm doing my personal work because you always have the option of printing it cheap if you just do nice black and white work. But left to my own devices, I would do my stuff all in color. So I started doing these watercolor commissions, and I got all kinds of requests, and a lot of them were kind of hard, and some of them were less so. And as I worked on them, they got less and less hard. I figured I don't think I've ever done just portraits of faces from my imagination that were fully painted, and I started to do that. I developed a faster technique for doing an approximation of like a realistic portrait in watercolor that I could do really fast. So I found that it's had a very good effect. It's going to spill over to my personal work. So, and I did, some people did quick sketches, and I decided I was really grateful to people who were using their own resources to fight against what's going on in this country and to support the ACLU. So aside from the money that I spent on mailing the stuff, I haven't given any money myself. Other people like Liz Prince, I think her agreement was for every commission that she took, she would also kick in money. So she would give people a free drawing and give $10 for everybody that pitched in her name. So I didn't do that because just trying to pay my rent, but it's all really admirable, and I really respect people who spent their own time protesting, who spent their own money, in concrete terms, supporting the ACLU. So I wanted to do everything I could to show them that I put real time and care into doing these drawings.
That's really amazing. I mean, it's like you went really way, above and beyond there for that. That's exciting. And just wanting, so you mentioned also on there that mine's in the mail, and so I can't wait.
Yeah, that was really funny. I mailed out yesterday. I had virtually a day off. I sat down and I went through all the ACLU things, and I sent somebody an email named, how do you pronounce your last name?
Kunka.
Yeah, Andy Kunka. And I was like, hey, I did your portrait of Rom. It's on the way. Sorry to take so long. And it ended up being I didn't even make the connection. You'd almost think I did it so we didn't have an awkward moment on the podcast.
Well, I do appreciate it.
I appreciate it too.
I mean, I appreciate you saving me from an awkward moment. But but go ahead. Sorry.
What would you have said if you hadn't gotten it yet?
I don't know. I don't know what I would have said. Like that's I didn't know if I should even bring it up or not, because I don't want to sound like, hey, where's my thing?
Yeah. No, he wouldn't have said anything on mic, but afterwards there may have been some, I don't know, passive aggressive comment.
Yeah.
But I want to say, specifically in my case, it really was, I was following you on Facebook, and it really was your saying that you were doing that did is an immediate connection to me sending that, making that donation.
That's awesome.
So I really appreciate you doing that. I mean, because honestly, it was the evening of when the travel ban started getting initiated, and everybody was going to airports, and I was watching it on the news, and I was just getting really frustrated and wanting to do something. And I, living in South Carolina, there was nowhere I could go that there was nearby that there was a protest going on. And, and I was seeing, the heroic work that ACLU lawyers were doing that night anyway. And so making this connection. And then I think one of our friends, I think it might have been Sean Kleefeld, or it might be Damian Duffy. I can't remember, one of those two, put up a list actually of all the artists who were, following Sarah Glidden's lead. So, yeah.
Yeah. Sean Ford, Box Brown, Liz Prince, drawing a blank. I think there's a few others that I like too.
Julia Wirtz.
Yeah. Yeah. Great artists.
Mm-hmm.
So, Josh, in addition to the Alltime Comics, what are you currently either working on or planning to work on in the near future?
Planning nothing terribly concrete, but I have a couple ideas. But I've been writing a sequel to my book Theft I've been working on it for I think over 2 years now. It's the longest thing I've done. Mm-hmm. So hopefully it's good. It's about 180 pages, but there's it's really 140 pages of Theft, and then there's a 40-page adaptation of a old Frankenstein comic, because I really like doing cover songs virtually when I did sort of a reprise of an old Dick Briefer Frankenstein comic.
Oh, great.
And this Theft story, if anybody out there read Theft, the first part of it is in 1980, and Theft is 10 years old, and this is a sequel. It takes place in 1990, and he's 20. So it's pretty much done. I'm reworking a page right now. But man, every time I do a project, it is harder. Every comic I've finished, it feels like the last 7% is as hard as the previous 93%. And so compiling it, scanning the pages at 1200 DPI, getting all figuring out if there's any gaps or any corrections I need to make, and then putting it all in order. It's been trying to take just trying to barf out something that's stuck in your throat. So I'm in the middle of the barforama right now with finishing up the edit for that. But that's my current big project.
Well, it's good to hear that we have more Theft to look forward to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You were really going to say it was like taking an enormous dump, right? That's where you're heading with that?
And then I was like, why am I saying that? And I was like, well, whatever you have to get out of your body, it's whatever for me. But yeah, big dump.
Yeah. Well, so the next issue of All-Time Comics, Bullwhip, comes out in another couple of weeks, and then we have more after that. So, Josh, I want to thank you for coming on the Comics Alternative and talking with us about this. This has been fun.
This has been fun. Thank you.
It was great talking to Josh, and I really, I feel like we got into some good details and information about All-Time Comics. And again, I can't recommend these books enough. They've got a great feel to them, and their retro approach to superheroes hits my sweet spot. And so I'm really enjoying this and looking forward to the rest of the issues in the series.
Yeah, I am as well. And I'm also excited to hear him say that there's going to be another series, season 2 of All-Time Comics in the near future.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I'm really grateful to Josh for what he did for not only showing up on the show, but what he did to raise some money for ACLU and other charities, and that honestly did inspire me to make a donation myself. Yeah,
really good. So again, thanks, Josh, for being on the Comics Alternative. And if you want to find great comics like Josh's All-Time Comics, then be sure to check out the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com right now, and you will find unbelievable, mind-blowing specials. That's dcbservice.com. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know what you thought about our conversation with Josh Baer. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
That's right. Or you can get a hold of us by email. We are 2guys@comicsalternative.com, and you can get a hold of us individually. I'm Andy at comicsalternative.com.
And I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com.
And we also have our Twitter feed that you can check out at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right. You can find us elsewhere on social media, such as on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
That's right. All the ways to get a hold of us, let us know how we're doing, and find out what we're doing.
That's right. And we have more interviews in the weeks to come, and we have a lot of them that we're scheduling. So be sure to check back often. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy. See ya.